Hey, this is Professor Homa. Welcome to Project 3 Computer Graphics. We're going to be doing a book cover, and we're going to be incorporating our colorizing techniques that we did in EX1 on this book cover, and then we're going to be putting together some text and some basic effects in InDesign, because that's basically the process that we would use in publishing. We would do our photo work in Photoshop, save it as a TIFF, and then put it in InDesign. Now we're looking at the finished PDF version, because once it goes to InDesign, we can then save it as a PDF to distribute it, and a lot of times we'll send files to printers as PDF. And it'll look exactly as we laid it out, except you don't need InDesign to open it up. You can view it in Adobe Reader or any program that views PDF files. Right now I'm viewing this in preview on a Mac, and this is the finished version. I'm viewing it in full screen. And there I am in preview, and we're going to kind of work backwards here. And let me just show you that these are the files that we're going to have when we're finished with this product. We're going to start with a Photoshop, then we're going to make a TIFF file once we're done, which is basically a flattened version of what we did in Photoshop. Then we're going to go in InDesign, and we're going to, you can't see it right now. Okay, then I'm going to go to InDesign, and here's the file in InDesign. You can see this. I use text boxes. Here's one for Finding the Real. Here's one for Marilyn. They're in separate text boxes because of the drop shadow effect. Only goes on a text box. You can't just apply it just to letters or characters. It goes to all the characters in that text box. That's why they're separate. So I have the italic up here. Down here, same thing. Text box. Now you could make these go across, and I'll go through this when we do this. And this is a text box that has a white background with kind of purple type. And we'll go over a little bit of some of the techniques in InDesign as well, as far as using some of these custom colors. But we're going to be working in CMYK, and I just want to mention that because when we make we're going to work in RGB in Photoshop, and then we're going to make a CMYK file when we convert to TIFF. So we'll go through that process. Most of the process is going to be the colorizing, and that should be fun. And I had fun working on this one, and I'll go to Photoshop and just kind of show you what was done. I don't have to do this because we already went over colorizing, and you can see here I put all my colorized layers in a layer folder or a layer group, so that's in there. Also, I'll even turn off this background so you don't see it, and I'll turn off the colorized. Now, what I ended up doing, this Marilyn photo that I had in here actually had a hard edge on it, and I knew I was going to put some kind of title up here, so what I did was to put a little layer mask on it. This is the layer mask. There you can see the layer mask, and it's basically, I made an empty layer mask that was reveal all, and I used my gradient, and I went black to white. I basically went on the top edge. I went like right here, and I did black to white and did a gradient. And well, actually, let me delete the layer mask, and I'll just add it again. I'll show you what I did. I went to layer mask, reveal all, so we could see everything. And what I did was I did black and white on this layer mask. I just kind of went to the top here and just kind of drug down. You could hold shift to keep it in a straight line, and just kind of made that soft edge there. And that's all I did. And if I put on the background, now the background has a color effect on it, so let me turn that off. So that's kind of what it does. So that's what I wanted. I wanted a soft edge here, so there's a nice transition for my title up there. Okay, so that's pretty much what we did. Now the colorizing, I'll open up my colorizing layer here, and I'll turn it on, and I'll show you kind of things I did, and at least some of the layers, and there's not much else to show you here. But you know, I did the shirt. I don't know if you could see that, but I did kind of a purple tint on the shirt. I did her skin. I should zoom into this a little bit more so you could see this. I worked on her skin with kind of a, off-white color, and I should go into skin. Let me go into, remember I did it the same way as EX1, so if I go into color overlay, this is the color I used. That's the color I used, kind of a beigey color for her skin. And I'll cancel out of that. And that's and I painted all of her skin. Now I didn't do everything. I actually left her eyelids separate because I assumed she had eyeshadow. So I did the eyelids separate, and I did the lips separate, and I did the teeth separate. So you can see there's layers here for all those different areas, and I don't have to go through that because you know how to do that. I don't think there was anything real tricky that I encountered. I really had to zoom in to do the eyes, and there were some areas where I used some eyebrow color, and I actually added some highlights to her hair to just give some different tone. If you see really good colorized images, you'll see that they'll blend some tones, because even on her face, I could have made a layer and put some kind of pink tones to kind of give her a little more pink on her face, because it's all one tone of that, so that there's not a lot of different tones here. So it's not completely realistic, if you look at some of the colorizing examples you see out there, some of them are fantastic, and you could swear they were taken in color, even though they're not. So this is a little more of an amateur version, but it was still fun working on it. And I put blue in this background of the barn, and then I even put I'll look at the whole thing again, and I even put a background behind it and colorize that so it would kind of match up. So I kind of matched up that blue behind it to give that feel, and I kind of figured this would be the area where I'd put my title. And also, I should go back and mention this again. When you start this project, when you go to image size, if you look at it for image size, you should be working in basically something that's 5 by 7 1/4 at 200 resolution. I brought my image and pasted it in here so it would be in that resolution. It's not super high resolution, because some of the images that people would get, I knew that they wouldn't be really high resolution depending where you're getting them from. So I kind of put that down a little bit. It'll still look nice if you see it on the web, or even if you print out on the color printer, it'll look nice, but I didn't go all the way up to 300. But that's, I think for what we're doing here, that's perfect, because you're not going to find super high res images of these black and white images on the web. So keep in mind, 5 by 7 1/4, kind of a book cover size we worked in. We're working in RGB color. And we're going to work in RGB the whole time, but then we're going to convert it to CMYK. So the next step of this, after doing all this and putting my images in, or putting my layers in my colorized layer, which you can see again, this is how it started, this is what I ended up with. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this as a TIFF file. So I'm going to go File, and I'm going to do Save As. I'm not going to use Save for Web. This isn't for web, this is for print. So I'm going to do Save As. And I'm going to save it in that same folder. Now, I already have ones in here that I use, so I'm just going to put a 2 after these, so you could tell, I'm using a little bit different one. So because I'm going to do this starting over, so I'm going to call this 2 right now. So I'm going to save this TIFF file. And when you save a TIFF, you want to uncheck layers. And, well, most importantly, you want to make sure you make it a TIFF format. So when you do that on a Mac, it should change that to TIFF, and it should, when you change the format, and you should uncheck layers. If you forget, if you hit save and you forget, there's still an area down here that you could check that says discard layers and save a copy. And what that means, and you don't have to worry about anything else with TIFF. You don't have to worry about compression or anything like that. Just hit OK. And if you forgot to uncheck layers, discard layers here. And it might even warn you that you might get a message saying that you have layers and it'll make a larger file size. But we don't need layers. We don't need this giant file. It's like 40 meg. So I'm going to hit OK right now and save this file. And it's saved. Now notice it doesn't show it to me. It saves it as a copy in the background. And I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open up the TIFF file, and I'm going to go find the one with the 2 on it, the one that I just did. And there it is. Now as I look at it, I looked at some other versions too, and I even saw this same Marilyn Monroe done online that somebody did it. I didn't intend it, but what I am going to do is 2 things here. Is one, I'm going to go to image mode, and I'm going to convert it to CMYK. You shouldn't see a big difference. It might dull some colors slightly, but that's probably okay, because we're in RGB. CMYK is print colors, so we're going to convert it so it looks more like print colors, and it'll actually separate out in ink colors. And you might see a slight difference, but what I'm also going to do, I'll zoom in a little bit. I'm also going to sharpen this a little bit, and I'm also going to tweak it a little. And I'm tweaking, notice I'm not messing with the Photoshop. I'm going to tweak this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all go to Image Adjustments Levels. Now this would depend on the image you're using. What I'm saying here may not work for yours, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to I see I have this flat line here. It's very bright. I'm actually going to tweak my image a little. Actually increase the contrast just a little bit. I'm going to bring this in, increase the contrast. Actually, I don't need the brights highlighted. It bleaches out, but I'm going to bring the contrast down just a little bit over and darken this up a little. Just a little bit to kind of, and I'm even going to take down the midtones a little, move them to the right. Just give a little more kind of contrast, a little more drama to it than it had originally. If I turn it off, I don't know if you could see the difference, but it looks a little less pasty, adding a little more contrast, which I think looks nicer. So I'm going to hit OK, and I think it looks nicer like that. So what I'm also going to do, I'm going to warm it up a little, maybe to give, because I have blue back here, I have this warm here. I could also go to Image Adjustments. And to warm things, I like to use Photo Filter. I like to use this warming filter. They have warming filters and cooling filters, and it makes it real easy to either cool down warm photos or warm up cooler photos. And I'm going to use a warming filter. I'll just use the first one here and turn it down a little. And you could use Preview to kind of preview it. And it's not a huge difference, but it gives an overall warm tone, which I like. And I'm maybe going to turn it down to like 20. just a little bit. And again, you could look at before and after, and it just kind of, it gives a little more unifying because it brings some warmth to the background too, which I like. So I'm going to hit OK. And one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. And I'm just going to sharpen this. I might put it up to like around 80 or so. Because remember, at higher resolution, you could use a little more sharpening. When we're doing web images and you sharpen, you know, it's really noticeable, but this isn't. So you could look here. You could click and hold down, look at before and after, or you can hit preview. You shouldn't see a lot. You might even be able to go up to 100 on this. I usually, mention going 50 to 100, but again, it's a book cover. You really want it to be, this is something that's seen from far away. People don't hold them up close and study them. They might see them in a store or something like that. So over sharpening just slightly is not a bad thing. So 100, 1.20 is probably pretty good. It gives a little more crispness to my original. It sharpens up some details of her face and all. It looks nice. So I'm going to hit OK. So a couple things we did. Image adjustments gave it a little more contrast. Photo filter gave it a little more warmth. And sharpening, unsharp mask, tightened it up a little and gave it a little more crispness. So, and I did it all to the TIFF file. Now, if I completely screwed it up, I could delete this and make a new TIFF for my Photoshop file, because this is where my original is coming from with all those layers. But I'm working on my TIFF, and then all you have to do is just close this up and hit save again, and it'll save the changes I just did. Okay, now what I'm going to be doing now is going to InDesign, bringing that TIFF file into InDesign, and putting my text on it and making it kind of a finished layout.